You know, our world, globally, our world, we have so much traumatized each other. And so when I think about working with traumatized patients or my own trauma, right, it is such a hard journey. And it can take so long. I've seen some people that move very quickly, relatively speaking, and become much better at humanness, you know, in like only 5 years. And other people who have never known human connectedness, maybe a dozen years later, they're just discovering what it's like to actually connect with somebody, and it's wonderful. So I have great respect for how long it can take, how difficult, how up and down and confusing, and I call it the fog of growth, you know, like the fog of war, the fog of growth. So I think for our planet, for all of us as a species, there's this journey. And the hardest thing, I think, is to move out of the feeling for life that's all about fear and anger and the need to get control. And, you know, when situations have been terrible, you need to control things. And all of that, and humiliation and contempt and defensiveness and all that stuff, to leave it behind, to relax enough in life to be like we just were, you know, happy and joyful, and not need to alternate between joyful and then you know, contract back in and that kind of thing, which the contracting could go on for 5 or 10 years, or maybe as we get better for 2 days, and we get better still, 2 hours, and then maybe we don't need to do it so much. So what I want to focus on is this notion of becoming globally happier together. I think is an immensely great objective for globalization. Right? So I wanted to put some smiling faces. I don't know if you can see them, but I wanted faces to be smiling at you as you listen. So, thank you. So when you look around the world today through the modern lens, what you see is the world is divided into 200 countries. This is the reality. This is what the working situation is. And on the other hand, if you change lenses and you look beneath that, you see 30,000 or so, rough estimate, of First Nations, indigenous peoples, ethnic groups, whatever name you give to it, 30,000 or more of peoples, different ways of being societies all together from modern nation states, right? So we have this double layer of organization going on the planet of how to be societies. Both coexist. So I like to say there's a double cultural DNA right now. And part of the journey is to learn we can learn from each other. That in the modern world, there was a sense we leave all that behind. We advance, right? But I don't think we can advance from here to become a good world together unless we turn around and find our brothers and sisters in the First Nation, indigenous world and learn what we can learn from them and have the humility to understand we don't have the knowledge base and the feel for certain things that's necessary to make something other than the modern world of contending countries. To make a whole world pulling together, there are other peoples, other ways of living that maybe know some things about it that we don't know. So, our task, each of us as a country or as a people, is to, we now have this new context. Life has been globalized, right? So all of us are here and now we all know it and we interact with each other. For Norway, for the US, for the Maori, for everybody, each faces the question, how do we make sense out of this? What are we going to make of this? How do we make our own path, our own tomorrow that will be good for us? You know, what's our resourcefulness in these new times when there are new dangers as well as new opportunities, right? So everybody has to find that, but at the same time we also have to think about all those other countries, all those other peoples. How do we want them to be? How do we want us all to be operating together so this is a good environment for my people, my country, to be able to make a good life here? how is this going to work for all of us? So this is a task we all face. Carmen has spoken from his culture. In my culture, we tend to be very grandiose, and we think we are now providing the thinking for the entire human species. This is not, of course, very realistic. So I realize what I'm doing is I am talking about some things from my culture, which is even smaller than the United States. It's the eastern coast of the United States in the middle of it. So what I have to share is some of how we maybe think about some things. And maybe you can provide some feedback that will be helpful to us. Maybe you learn some things from us. It's in that spirit of sharing. So in my culture, we think that we organize within ourselves and in the world to create power for ourselves and profit. But I think maybe we could instead think about organizing to create a shared life together in which all the peoples and all the countries feel happier in life. What would it be like to live in historical era, historical circumstances where everybody feels this is fair, this is just, this is being done in a good way, and it's easier to be in love with life than not. And everybody feels like we cherish these times. We're so grateful to be alive in these times. For everybody to feel that, this would be, I think, an objective for globalization that would be worthy of the best in all of us. So now I tell you a story as, whoops, there it is, Christmas 1968. This is a story from my culture, and maybe some of yours as well. So in 1968, what? Yeah, I know, I'm having to, this is a strange relation. This is like everybody on their cell phone. Excuse me, I have to just, I'll be right with you. So it was in 1968, it was only 23 years earlier that the world warring had finished. 38 countries, 60 million people had died. Huge slaughter worldwide. Is only 23 years in the background. And in the foreground was the United States had 5,000 nuclear warheads, the Soviet Union 850. The thing to know is each one of those, each one was a city killer. When it landed, whole city is gone. So this many is not just a city killing thing, this is nation killing, right? So this is now right there, right? And there were the wars of liberation, the decolonization, all around the planet were happening. And in 1968 was the sort of revolutionary wave sort of washed across the planet. There was urban rioting in, I have to look, Chicago, Berlin, Tokyo, Mexico City, Beijing, Prague, France. Immense turbulence all over the planet. Immense sense of violence, danger, uncertainty, confusion. And at that point, I always get choked up when I talk. So, this is when I get choked up today. At that point, a couple days before Christmas Eve, this huge Saturn rocket took off from America, and 3 men left all this behind and traveled 240,000 miles away from it and began to go into an orbit around the moon. And they passed behind the moon, and as they came out the other side, for the first time in the whole existence of our planet and our species, right, somebody saw rising over the horizon the planet Earth, and one of them took this picture, and it became called Earthrise. And with that picture and those that came after, all the people on the planet who were living in all this danger and all this violence and all this, there was this little dream, this hope, kind of had a way to crystallize a little bit more. Maybe we could be different. Maybe we could live together in a whole different way than world warring. maybe this could be a world of people all pulling together for our common good. So this kind of was born. Now, in fact, many things happened after that that weren't quite what we dreamt, right? But there has been a shift, right? The world, people talk about understanding the world in terms of system. Another way to think is like in terms of theater, drama. You know, all the countries and all the peoples and so on have their scripted roles, you know, in this whole thing, to fight it, to advance it, to whatever it is. And it had been a world of nation states set against each other, each pursuing power and profit. And so it was a perfect medium for warring, right? You'd go at it this way and you're going to get wars. And and then suddenly the Cold, bless you, it's okay. It's enough to make anyone sneeze. Suddenly the Cold War was over. And in my country, all of the magazines and everybody said, so what's next? What can the world be about if it's not about the Cold War? That was supposed to go on till the end of the planet, right? And for 10 years we didn't know. And then suddenly we had this bright idea. It'll be about globalization. It'll be about the internet. It'll be about free market capitalism. It will be about what can unite us all in a common pursuit of prosperity. Sounded good, right? We'll all be consumers. It'll be great. The world will be a giant supermarket and we'll all have a good time. So this was the new vision. Of course, we know that it was just another configuration of antagonisms, exploitation, bad things happening among us. So then the question is, this was good because it was a step away from a kind of step away from overt shooting each other, bombing each other. That's good. It's always good to reduce that. But what's the next rewrite of the script? What's the new version going to be about? So I will say some things about that, but you have to understand it's me and my culture talking about it. It is not necessarily how you would think about it, and you may think about it in much purer terms, in much more helpful terms, but I give you ours. So I'm a psychologist, so today in America it's all about neuroscience because somebody can take pictures of the brain, right? So we're very enchanted with this. This is all enough to make everyone very excited. A gentleman named Paul MacLean was looking at brains of many species, and he began to see a pattern, and we still think that's kind of true, but it's much more complex. So he called it the Triune Brain. There's a part of our brain that's much like the brain in reptiles. So a part of us is like the whole brain of reptiles. And there's another part of our brain that sort of got added on that we have in common with mammals. All of this is pre-human. So there are parts of us that are pre-human, and we can make the world from our pre-human parts. And then there's this new neocortex, the new brain, that's uniquely human. And so we can make a world together from our humanness, and we can make a uniquely human world. But we are always, you know, capable. My brain is quite capable of going to any of those places. So I'll talk a little bit about those places. So the reptilian brain is where in trauma they talk about fight and flight and freeze, immobility. You know, until the tiger comes in the room, you can freeze, you can run, you can decide to fight it. Good luck. So, but the sympathetic nervous system gets your heart pounding, gets your breathing much deeper, releases all kinds of sugar, and so the blood rushes to the muscles with oxygen and sugar, and you have this tremendous burst of physical energy for your running or your fighting or whatever you're going to do. What we don't talk about so much is we also have it in us to be predators. We have an instinct for fleeing or fighting a predator. We also have the instinctual hardware for being predators, for hunting down. Just as there is the instinct to escape and to hide, there's also the instinct to hunt down and kill. And human beings are capable, we are as a species, we're capable of going to either. Now, that doesn't mean the smart part of the brain is shut off. People can be very smart about doing these very things. And so if this part of the brain is using our smarts, we can make a world that's violent. We can make a world at war. This is one path we can go down for our future, right? Then came the mammalian brain, and it brings a couple of kinds of things. So I'll say this one first. With more complex social organization, we have social hierarchy. We have an instinctive feel for dominance and submission behaviors, and for fighting off dominance, refusing to submit. We understand this instinctively, right? And hierarchy is like resource hierarchy. The strongest, maybe, get most of the resources. Then there's the people or the whatever out on the edges that get very little. And the people in between do all the work to move the resources up. We have an instinct for reorganizing ourselves in these kinds of ways, right? It just comes to us like that if we give in to that. And that's what's happening today, in my country at least. You see this huge movement in the last 30 years. There's this massive reorganization along that instinctual line, right? Free market capitalism, neoliberalism was all a ideology for covering, a rationalization to cover up this huge reorganization of wealth up and out from the middle class. Everybody can get a little poorer and they can get a lot wealthier. So that can make a dominant and peripheral world. So the dominant countries, the peripheral countries, the dominant people in the culture, da-da-da-da-da. And then, so there's a kind of line here, and everything above this feels different, very, very different. This, you know, this dominance and periphery world, this violent world, we know this very well. We have a really good feel for it because we've been living in it. This is our normal, right? Especially those of us who are a bit older, this is our normal. And so the huge challenge is to experience a different kind of normal. And a lot of people have the belief this is the only way we can be. It's not true. It's also in us to be very different from this. So I'll talk a little bit about that. The attachment instinct in the wild, right, with the new babies, right, and the new little ones, are much safer from predators if they're around their mothers and fathers, the adults, if there's a closeness there. So attachment is that chemical is oxytocin that happens inside us. It makes us feel better if we can see where mom and dad are, or we can see where the children are, and we get closer. All those things we do when we're close to one another, hold hands, hold each other and hug, embrace, all of that stuff. Oxytocin flows and we feel better. We feel safer, we feel happier. So this is in our nature. And when we organize a world or a society or a town from that place, there's more cooperation, and we feel like we're safer because we're together. We're better because all of us are here and we're all in on this. We're smarter because we're all here and we're listening to each other. Nurturing, you know, is that feeling you have for the little ones and for anybody fragile, for people who are sick or elderly or whatever. Anybody who is coming into a new growth, and you have that feeling like, yes, I want to see this happen. I want to see this flourishing, and I'll do what I can. I'll sacrifice to help that happen, right? That's that instinct for nurturing. So we could come from that place in regard to other classes in society, in regard to other countries, in regard to other peoples. Instead of seeing how you might threaten me, we could see how's it going for you? What needs a little nourishing in you? And what needs a little nourishing in us? So we can make a cooperative world. And then there's this human brain that is capable of empathy, right? We can understand what's going on inside somebody else, capable of reflection. You know, I have this urge to do whatever, but I can kind of hold it and kind of notice it and maybe live with it for a while, think about what would happen next, what's the blah, blah, blah. We can reflect. We can think ahead. We can do all those wonderful things. And so we can make a world where we learn from each other, learn with each other, because ours is the kind of brain that is not bound by instinct. We're not bound to do what our ancestors exactly did every time in every situation. Ours is a species that invents new ways of being together, right? And we can discover so much, but we're also profoundly ignorant. We came onto this planet profoundly ignorant. We have to discover even how to be human. So we have all of this stuff inside of us, and then we have to notice all these different things and figure out how to be wise about it. So when we look around at other peoples and other countries, we could be having a big discussion. Globalization could be a big conversation instead of a big pursuit of profit. It's like, well, what did you learn about how best to be human so that you can be happy together? And when people mess it up, what have you learned about how they can kind of come back and find a better way? What did you learn about that? And we could learn from each other, and we could learn together. That could be what globalization is. And also the sense of a spiritual frame. So like Carmen is bringing in very strongly a spiritual frame. On open space on the internet, there was a open space dialogue going on yesterday led by Hari Banajah on Buddhist spirituality, right? And there's this sense of how can you have a sense together that we are like with the chapel, all of us coming from the same great source of wisdom that could be flowing through us all, the same great heart and feelings of loving and taking in love that could be flowing through us all. How do we come together to a spiritual sense of this that we all share? Because if we come from that, then we can all live with our urges to kill each other, and we can say, whoa, I have such a desire to kill you today. It would be such fun, but I won't do it, you know, because I see in you that there is great goodness in you, right? So, so we can make these different kinds of worlds. These are our choices of the future, our global tomorrow. There's a limited number of choices. Okay, and let's see, what can you punch up the next thing, whatever it is? Oh yes, so I noticed, thinking about this, some places and some people and some organizations and some individuals are very mired in this place, this part of themselves, right? And for them, it is so painful, if it's whole places, to be in where they are is so painful, so dangerous. You know, when Steve talks about being in a limited security environment, that's such a sweet euphemism. So many people, like Evelyn was saying yesterday, a few houses away, people were assassinated, right? So in these places where, so Peter Coleman at Columbia University says 95% of these conflicts are amenable to resolution. It's not so hard to get there. 5% seem just intractable. No matter what you do, it stays the same. No matter how you try, you just get sucked into it and you suffer too. To be in those places is such a painful experience of our existence today. That's where they are. And if you go in to help them, you will feel the pain of that, right? In thinking about this gentleman, I shouldn't say gentleman, the man here who did this terrible thing a year ago, we just had something in the United States where somebody shot a bunch of people in a Sikh temple. We've had a bunch of these things in the U.S. And I began to realize they view themselves, in the U.S. anyway, as warriors. as warriors. So they see a dignity in what they're doing. They are mobilized to fight for whatever. And yet they are locked into that. And so for them, there is this terrible journey and wonderful journey they need to embark on to get to a better place, but they don't seem to know it. And the rest of us live with this. So then there's a whole other larger part of the world, and this is most of us around the world, countries and peoples, whatever. And some of us are doing kind of well, some of us are doing kind of really badly. There's a lot of, I don't see the gentleman here today who said it yesterday, system disruption. Maybe it could be a good thing. You know, maybe our system needs a little. So, and what's his name? Emanuel Wallerstein says, when the system is ending, when it's falling apart, right, it has certain characteristics. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos. Good things happen, terrible things happen, random violence happens. It can be all this stuff. And it's a time when, and this is what's great about Wallerstein, he says, it's a time when one person or a small number of people have unprecedented opportunity to make change. Like the butterfly in chaos theory, it flaps its wings and a hurricane happens somewhere else. You know, each of you is a butterfly. Each of us is a butterfly. We flap our wings to make something good, and we don't know what forces we set in motion because everything is fluid right now, and the world can come together in a different way. So, so this is a time when the bad butterflies are doing this like crazy and the good butterflies are going like this, and you see a lot of that. And then there are some people who are just doing this, being together globally and having a great time of it. So my example is a musical group called the Silk Road, put together by Yo-Yo Ma, who is a cellist. And he set out to get musicians from many cultures, and they play together. And when they perform, it's really improvisation, you know? And so they talked about, I heard them talk about, what does it take from them to be able to do this? That they're coming from different instruments, from different cultures, different ways of making music, and yet somehow this comes out beautiful. How does this, and they enjoy it. How do they do this? So they said, here's the formula. Sorry, yeah. So flexibility. They have to, the people who do this and enjoy it are very flexible, but I think they're only flexible because they're anchored so firmly in their own skills and in their own feel for music and in their own whatever. So I think this is true of cultures too. We can afford to be flexible as cultures if we're anchored in our own roots and our own identity. It's harder to be flexible if we're kind of all shaky about where we are. And second thing is cooperation, and they talk about as they're playing, they're listening very much to the sounds of each other, you know, and then they play off that. So when we talk together, we do a lot of that, right? We're really listening to each other, and then we play off it, you know. So this is some of what I've appreciated so much about all of you and all of us together, is we play off of each other. Now, in contrast, there are some cultures that don't want to do this globalization thing. So there are some indigenous peoples on the western coast of Canada, and Canada has come to them and said, respectfully for a change, you can participate in the economy, you can whatever you would like to do. And they got together among themselves, and they talked about it, and they, you know, were present with it, and they came back and they said, no thank you. We don't want your money. We don't want to interchange with you. We have traditional ways. We like to go fishing off the coast in the Pacific Ocean. We'll live our own life, and we're really happy that way. So there are some people who are very happy today because they're doing this global thing, and others because they're doing their own cultural thing. And then so many of us are just very confused and we don't know what we're doing. So, so I was thinking, 1968 was a time, and I know I'm doing a lot of talking, so I apologize. I hope this is this being okay? Yeah? All right, so because it's much better when all of us talk, right? It's much better when all of us talk, not just me. So I'm hoping I end up quickly, so we can. Okay, so I thought 1968 with the revolutionary urban rioting, you know, and the revolutionary wars of liberation, they knew about each other. You could see it on TV, you know, and you could get it over the telephone. Now, of course, you can get it over the cell phone and the internet and Twitter and all this stuff. But I thought, well, what could we be doing concretely to make change? Uli was talking about this yesterday. What do we do to make change? And what could we be concretely doing to make change that everybody could see everybody else on the planet and say, haha, they're doing it too. We're all in on this together. Look at us go. Whoa. So at least in the modern world, something I noticed. Could you, yeah. So the people like Yo-Yo Ma and those people, they're already doing happy things, so I won't talk about them. So I wanted to say for most of us, with this sort of hierarchical world, what I notice about it, I heard some speeches recently by a former president of ours, John Kennedy, and his brother Robert Kennedy, and I felt they talked with such moral presence. They talked so easily from a moral presence about the realities of our society and of the world, right? And they had their flaws and all the rest of it, but I was so impressed by this, and I thought, why can I not do that? And I realized I live in a bubble. I live just among my own little world. You know, there's academics, and it's white, and it's middle class, and you know, it's a very small town. We're all kind of all the same. I don't live with the big differences in my country, right? So I can't speak deeply from a feeling for my country as a whole, because I am in this bubble. So I thought, you know, we need to get out of our bubbles. And so there's this wonderful thing that I first heard from Porto Alegre. Is that how you say it? That's right? Okay. Yeah, okay. So they have this thing as a city, and cities are all, you know, cities can do this. It's called participatory budgeting. So the city collects all these taxes for next year to spend on next year. So it knows how much money is in the pot, right, to spend. It also has all these claims on the money, from the sewer system people to the water system people to the this and the that and the other thing. And so it knows all these wants for that money. And then what they do is they have neighborhood councils. And so the city is responsible to bring all of this information to every neighborhood council. And every neighborhood council decides what they would want done with the money, how they want it divided up, who gets it. And then out of putting all that together, the budget for the city is formed for the next year. So my favorite story of this was there was a budget for fixing sidewalks, right? And so these groups, these neighborhoods, they get the money and they think, well, you know, our sidewalk could use some repair. But we really don't know anything about the sidewalks in the rest of the city. So they went out and they walked the sidewalks of the whole city. And they came back and they said, you know, ours could use a little repair, but some of those places, oh my goodness, they really need the money. So we'll give it to them, not to us. We can get it some other year. But they need it first. So there is this empathy that gets formed. So I think this is a wonderful thing, right? So if this were to catch on as a practical thing, and we were to see it as a movement around the world, what I like about it is we're not waiting for the nation to make big change. We're not waiting for the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the World Trade Organization and the UN and all those. We're not waiting for the big system change. But on this local level, in my country, we are very powerless because we don't have community. It's just every individual against this whole world. So we feel very vulnerable, very insecure, and very unable to influence anything. So I'm thinking, you know, if we did this, we would start to feel in control of our lives together. And we would start to know what democracy is. And then, on lived experience, we could start to think about, well, maybe we could look at the nation that way. Maybe we could do some things on that level. So that's why I'm pushing this. Okay. For the intractable 5%ers, they're so locked into their own struggle. So this was like in Ireland for a long time. It's in the Mideast, right? It's in a number of places. It's just so stuck. It would be amazing if instead of learning from each other more tactics of violence and all that stuff, to see this as a journey toward being a better life together, and to see that as something that being on a path. If that were to catch on, all of us intractable conflict peoples, we're on a path together. We're working our way out of our mess just like you're working your way out of your mess. We have some dignity in that together. That would be a wonderful development. If that happens, you know, I think the rest of us can just go on a really big holiday. We can sing happy birthday a lot to our whole world. Whoops, back one. So, how am I doing on time? Do I have, what more time do I have? Okay. All right, so I'll say one more thing and then maybe we can just talk. I hope. I hope I'm not, you know, lulling you into passivity here. This is the great danger of this configuration. It's like you could all be passive, you know. I'll do this, boom, boom, boom. And then all the life goes out of everything. So, in my country, we are tough, right? There's a toughness in my country, and it's especially harsh right now. It has grown much harsher in the last 30 years. Much tougher, much meaner, much more brutal, right? So, how does that change? We talked in a group over here about male culture versus female culture, Western culture versus other cultures, and we found we were really talking about a softer, more empathic way versus toughness. And so a big question. So I'll tell you a story. I went in the ending years of the Cold War. I interviewed 3 retired admirals and 1 retired general who had been involved in nuclear weapons during the Cold War. And I asked them what it was like, you know, at great length in different ways. So I'm sitting in an office with a retired admiral, Eugene Carroll. I am happy to say his name because he's such a good man. He was such a good man. And so we're having this discussion, and he's saying really good things. And he's teaching me a lot. But it's a cinder block room, and on the walls are pictures of Navy fighter planes. And there is one picture just behind him on the windowsill with his grandchildren. And I noticed about myself as the interview is going on, my eyes keep going to this picture more and more often. And I say, what's going on with me that I keep looking at this picture instead of him or instead of something else? And I realize I am needing this picture. I am needing to see the children. I'm needing to see the look on their faces because of what we're talking about. And then afterwards it came to me, this is the heart of the Cold War, right? This is the heart of the Cold War, was all of these, mostly men, in all these different countries were thinking about how to go about things and leaving out of the picture that we and they, we all have children. And they are fathers too. And they have wives, and the wives are mothers. And this is true of all of us. And the feelings that come with that, all of that was left out. Because, of course, it should be left out. And that was the thinking. It should be left out. We have to be tough enough to leave all that out. So I realize when you leave that out, you become crazy. You become crazy in the head. And you are at risk of going down into that fight kind of mentality. Especially us men. We can go there. Right? And so it begins to make sense that we would make 5,000 city-killing bombs, nation-killing bombs. It makes sense. It's perfectly rational because of all these things. And it makes sense to them on the other side, blah, 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 blah. So I realize how important it is for this tough culture to soften by allowing in these soft feelings of attachment, of love, you know? So it's been so helpful to me here to get so many hugs, you know, soft hugs. It's like a marital therapist say, you hug in a marriage, you know, when there's trouble. You hug until you can relax into it. So some people will hug like this even with their spouse, right? They hug like this. And he says, no, you have to hug until you soften into it. And that softening tells you the oxytocin is flowing. And now there's that sense of magic, and you're happy together, right? And you're bonded together. And these wonderful feelings happen. There's a poem, I think, by Yeats, a British guy, British poet, sorry. And it says something about the mountain grass cannot but help but keep the impression in it of where the mountain rabbit, the mountain hare, has lain overnight. And so it's like when there's these hugs of familiarity, you know, those close to us are impressed into our bodies and memories and our souls, right? For a long, long time. So how do we get from tough to there? For me, I have similar questions for myself because I grew up with a lot of not such nice things. So I went to a men's movement meeting. We had a men's movement in the United States for a while. Now everybody has forgotten it ever existed. And this poet, Robert Bly, and a couple other guys, they would tell a traditional story and they would discuss it with us. So in this particular story, this man has a horse, a magic horse that talks. And the talking horse at key moments would say, blah, 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 you know, do this, that, and the other thing. Too much sadness turns a heart to stone. So they pause, and Robert Bly says, I don't know what to make of this because we're always telling men sadness is good. Don't be afraid of sadness. It's healing. And here the story says too much sadness turns a heart to stone. And I immediately thought to myself, I know exactly what it means because I lived with this with my mother. It means too much loss. More loss than you can bear can make a hardening up against the ocean, the tsunami of grief that you can't possibly handle by yourself. And if there are no gentle, empathic people around you, you would get destroyed. You would just, that would be it for life. So you develop a kind of hardening that can become bitter, right? So as I understand that, and then I think, well, maybe this has something to do with toughness as a culture. Maybe there has been historically too much loss, too much for the heart to bear over time. And so how do we soften out of that? So I just saw this crazy, wild, difficult to sit through movie, Beasts of the Southern Wild. Beast is like an animal seen in a negative way, you know, out of control, dangerous animal. Beasts of the Southern Wild. It was filmed off the southern coast of the United States, off of Louisiana. So it's these islands in the water, and the people who are living there are very poor and very low esteemed, and a lot of toughness and bravado and a lot of alcohol and a lot of wild celebrating and rooting for each other, pulling for each other, helping each other. And then there is this big wall in the sea that keeps the sea out, and behind it is my world, the white American, middle class, prosperous. There's a big oil refinery, all that stuff, and there's this wall that keeps the sea out when there are hurricanes, and it also keeps all those strange wild beasts of human beings. It keeps them out too. Okay, so to tell you a little bit about it, there's this girl, she's 5 years old, and her father's wife left him right after the girl was born. And it turns out she went to another island and she joined a brothel, of all things. We find that out later in the movie. So he is bereft. He has suffered too much loss. And he's raising this little girl. And so there are scenes where there is this toughening up of the little girl, and she's learning how to crack open a lobster, and they start this chant with her, and it becomes, who the man? Who's the man? Who the man? Who the man? And she say, I the man. Little 5-year-old, I the man. I the man. Who the man? And she gets louder and louder. And then she screams, I the man. And she does muscles and this whole thing. So it's a passing on of all of this toughness, right? This is how they survive all the loss. So so I have to say this as a man, and I think you as women, you might say it differently, but without maternal love, without the love of a woman, how can you not go into that place? You know? If you cannot take in that love and be moved and healed by it, nurtured by it, and you can't let your own love come out, the same could be said, you know, man to man, woman to woman, but just to focus on this for a minute, how can you know compassion? How can you be good? How can you be sane? And I'm thinking to myself, maybe this is the same for a culture. How can a culture be sane if it doesn't hold that maternal love, you know, and help people be in a good place? And also in the movie you see paternal love. So at the end of the movie, the little girl gets 3 other girls, and they do this big scream of strength, and they dive into the sea to swim towards this lighthouse out there that is actually a brothel. And a ship picks them up and takes them out there, and they go down into the brothel, and the women take the little girls in and hold them and provide this maternal love. And she meets her mother, who is good to her. And then after this touching base with real compassionate love, right, they go back. And she goes back to her father, who is dying, right? And he's just about dead at this point. And she's looking at him, and tears are coming down his face. And he says to her, no tears. And she says, no tears. That's part of their ritual thing, no tears. And then down her face. And then they both soften. And she lays down on him, and he takes her. So there is this softening, and she is saved by the love of her father and with her father, by not needing to make this wall between them of toughness. There is this saving of her so that she can have a softer heart and go forward into the future. And I thought, this is so beautiful, right? This is so beautiful, and maybe this is something that needs to happen in my culture very much, and we don't know quite how to get there. So I think to myself, and this is kind of my wrap-up, you could do the next slide. You know, our journey to be not so aggressive in the world and to be not so aggressive with each other. You know, how do we get softer? We maybe need to honor and sort of support women in their love, and men in their capacity for love, our love for each other and our love for children. And I have to say for myself, this is such a hard journey to come from a family and a background where there was no sense of this, you know, and then to gradually meet people who are that way and to begin to learn it's possible to be human in that way is so touching. And so I have to overcome so much in myself. I respect how difficult it is for my culture to overcome this, you know, and to learn to love ourselves. And if we can move on that journey, maybe we can let the rest of the world be, you know, and find their own way. So these are things I think about. And so I realized that I had put these pictures together in haste, and I have 2 males, a boy and Nelson Mandela, with looks of joy. And I said, oh, this is I'm leaving out the women. So I did a quick look for a female. I found this lovely girl with her joy. So I'm thinking, this is what our future should look like. This is what globalization of life should look like. And so those are the things I wish to share with you. So from my heart to yours, and from your hearts to me. So thank you. Maybe we could talk some now, just anything that kind of was striking to anybody, or anybody wants to, yeah.
Thank you very much, Mike. It was a wonderful speech. Or lecture, maybe. Yeah. Well, there's one point I was a little astonished when you said that you were talking about instincts, and you said that violence, killing, dominance, and to be tough is normal. And for me, yes, it's true. It is normal, but it's normal for men, but not for women. Or shall we say male culture, not the female culture. Because female culture, that has all what you told that you want, this warmth, this passion to love, that is more normal for women. But it has always in some way been depressed. It's been not, it has not been allowed to be normal. And so therefore, what you said afterwards, now in the last, being tough, and let us try to convert that toughness into love and compassion. I agree fully with you. And I think that is where we are now. We are on the way. We are on the way, and here in Norway at least, where we have been so lucky to have quite many female politicians right from the 70s, they have been working very hard for this in the parliament. Because today we have 50-50 male-females in government and nearly in parliament as well, and we have had it for more than 30 years. That is nearly 2 generations. So we, in the Nordic countries, I will say, we have been working with this for quite a long time. And I know that the world was very, very surprised when we, after this terrible terrorism last year, that the whole nation went with compassion, yes, with roses and songs and love. Yes. And our Prime Minister also said, let us meet this terrible act, all this violence, with love. That was quite courageous of him, I think, but he did. And we have had a year where we have been talking very much about this here in Norway. And I think we are on the way, and we are also on the way globally. But as long as we have politicians that believe in violence, believe in military, believe in arms, believe in more wars, well, we have to fight that. Because that is not the way. We have, and I think we that understand this, that see this, we have to fight. Because maybe these men are a little confused. What's right? What shall we do? But as long as you have market economy, as long as you have industry that goes for arms, it's profit, it's money in all this, then they will win because they are so strong. But we have to win. Yes. We have to work. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Oops. There's a DVD, a movie, Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And it's, yeah. All right. So this woman, what country was that? Do you remember? It's in Africa. I can't remember which country. No. Anyway, so there was this civil war stuff going on. And this woman organized the women. And they went to the men and they said, you know, enough. We need peace. We want peace. And in an interview afterwards, the filmmaker who made, you know, a film of this was asked to comment about the men. And so this was such a great opportunity to say men are awful. And instead she said, the men remembered who they are. They remembered who they are. And it's this core of the mammalian part of us that's about attachment and nurturing. And they remembered that tradition. And they remembered the tradition of loving women and children. So they remembered who they are. In my culture, it maybe has gone on a bit too long. There's nothing to remember, so it's like we have to discover who we are. But so, anybody else? Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
So can I do it from here? Yeah.
Thank you so much. It is vitamins to listen to you. Being a feminist, this is the best present you can give you being a man. But I'm amazed of what you tell about the USA. I was a student there when I was 17 years old, American Field Service student, and I was amazed of the love and the interest Americans showed me coming to a school in America. They invited me every weekend for dinners. They took me on trips. They were much more social than I find here sometimes with us, I think. I think we are more sort of back in our homes. And also, I want to ask you, what about the milieu of people around the churches? Because that was an experience I had. I'm fighting with my God and churches, you know, but I was touched by the social life around the church and how they did things together, much more than I ever experienced here. Yes, and then just one little comment on softness. Sometimes I experience that there is sort of two divided worlds. We have this hard toughness, profit, money, military industry. On the other side, we have such a softness that it becomes sentimental. It becomes so sweet and so soft, and in a bubble of soap and comfort. So I think softness, yes, intelligence from heart, but also the moral power, you know, the good masculine power. That I think you, Carmen, you show us the good masculine power. That is very nice because you have your heart with it all the time. So I think both, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So I have to say, in regard to male and female, us men can feel a little about that, thinking of it that way. So I like to think in terms of the brain, that we all have it in us to be violent and deadly and filled with hate. We also all have it in us to feel attachment and love and caring and so on. So I think it is also male in a different way, as female in a different way. So another way to talk about it. And thank you. You know, they say a friend is someone who reminds you of your song when you've temporarily forgotten how it goes. So you remind me about the good in my culture when I'm a little inundated in the other side. So thank you. You're a good friend. Other people? Yeah, please.
Okay. I was asked to introduce myself since I haven't been here before. My name is Elinor Halle, and I am a therapist. My direction is called psychosynthesis, and it's a direction coming from an Italian psychiatrist who traveled the world and tried to pick up what was essential in each tradition, in each culture. And when you've been talking, I've been sitting with something that I really wanted to share, to give kind of a different perspective from his perspective, which I'm really so fond of, and that has helped me to gain a new life. So, where do I start? Psychosynthesis believe that all human beings are born in God. Everybody, no exceptions, are part of God. It's not possible to avoid it. We are part of God, whether we choose it or not. The church has taken the power of God, which is horrible, but we are part of God. And God is part of us. And I think it's so beautiful with the Maori bit. I've been to New Zealand and I've read some books about the Maori tradition. And I heard about the walkabout that they do. Well, some part of the Maoris take a walkabout, and they have this confidence that they will have food, even though the desert is completely dry. You can't see a bird, you can't see water, you can't see anything. But they have this confidence inside themselves that they will get what they need. And I think what happened in our culture, our Western culture, is by inheritance. There's so much fear going on. There's so much fear. Our parents, our grandparents, all the traditions behind us are born into fear, because their parents had their inheritance and they couldn't see their children the way they needed to be seen. So what happens is that they go hard, they put on a mask, and they don't dare to be themselves, because they think that themselves is not enough. So I think it's so important just to see that what's happening in the world, even with Anders Behring Breivik, who was a therapist in our world, or in Norway. He's a victim of a tradition that has come from far behind, from long, many ages. And he was not taken care of the way he was supposed to be taken care of. His mother even cried for help when he was 4 and tried to run away from home. But the people that met him didn't do their job, possibly, and he became this terrorist. So imagine a child at 4 years old running away from home. What has he experienced? So what we do as children, or as grown-up, we keep this fear inside us and navigate the best we can, the way we have learned to navigate in our family. I was taught to be a good girl, because every time I was saying, no, I don't want this, my father was angry. So I thought, oh, I must be a good girl, otherwise people don't like me. So this good girl person followed me just until 10 years ago. And it was horrible, because I was locked inside myself. I couldn't live. So I think it's so important for us to find what I think it was you said, it says something about, and you also, to find the genuine strength in ourselves. You know, the masculine bit is not the warrior, but it's the genuine people who fight for love, who find their way. That's so important, you know, that we really dare. I mean, if I, for 15 years, should say that I should stand in front of you here, I would never dare to do that, because I hadn't had the courage. I wouldn't believe in myself, because I thought I was not good enough. But what the psychosynthesis has taught me, everybody is good enough. It's just that you need to believe it yourself, because you have been taught from your parents, your grandparents, in all generations, that you're not good enough. So you have to change. You have to do something differently. Okay? Thank you.
So much. Thank you. So I just pick up on that theme that's come up a couple times and then stop for this morning. So there's talk about empathy is good. Empathy is good. To be there with others is good. But also that centering and anchoring in one's genuineness brings strength. So some of the words that are coming: strength, courage, determination, persistence, boundaries, clarity, you know, the prophetic tradition. This is not the path. This is not the way. This is to be not fully human to do it that way. We don't nurture people into badness. We nurture people into doing it well. We nurture people into becoming better at love, better at loving, better at truth, better at being centered and having integrity, better at taking good care with life, with our future, with our home, the earth, all of those kinds of things. So it's a time for great empathy and for great strength. I think I didn't really emphasize that at all. So I'm very grateful to you and for bringing up the importance of that in the picture. So thank you so much. I think we have to move on. So may I hand this over?
Thank you, thank you, thank you.